Hey lovers, welcome back to Learning as We Go podcast. Here's a safe space for absolutely everyone to stay, feel supported in, and welcome. And today we're talking about living for the male gaze. A lot of us do it, and sometimes we don't even know that we're doing it, and sometimes we deny that we do it. And it's a very uncomfortable thing to talk about for few. This podcast episode was recently encouraged when I came across a video clip of Brittany Broski's podcast, and in this video she was going over the freedom that particularly women, but honestly everyone that's affected by the patriarchy, which is everyone, but some impacts are more extreme on some groups than others, would feel if we could stop feeling the need to attend to the male gaze. And this really got me wanting to record this episode for a little bit, and I'm finally doing it today. Living for the male gaze is something I came across around 2 years ago, and it is so embedded in the media that particularly young girls consume from a young age. And this may not necessarily be what a lot of individuals want to hear, but often, particularly women, are socialized into romanticism with Disney princesses and love stories often being proposed to an audience of younger girls, and shows and media about adventure and curiosity and missions and accomplishing your goals, like the movies Cars or Toy Story, for example, being often presented to young boys. And this is a thing that's often very prevalent, but we often underestimate the impacts of being exposed to this sort of media from a young age that often follows through in the rest of how we go about our lives. For example, now that I'm older, a lot of women my age often consume rom-com media. And not saying that it's only women that are consuming it, other people genuinely find pleasure in this type of media, but often when a certain theme is reoccurring again and again and again in these types of medias, our brain recognizes it as something as desirable. And that's actually part of how our brain works. When we are exposed to a topic or feature or characteristics again and again and again, our brains are functioned in a way that recognizes that thing as desirable or admirable. And we seek that in our daily lives. And it's really hard to get out of this, even if you do recognize it without daily practice. And this is no way shaming anyone at all. Sometimes people feel empowered by romanticism, and that's completely valid, and that's actually a great thing. If your partner is actively pursuing your best interests as well as theirs, and actively collaborating with you and communicating with you to serve both of your highest goods, that's phenomenal. However, this unfortunately isn't the case for a lot of us. And sometimes we convince ourselves that it is. Living for the male gaze was something that I tended to do a lot last year in particular. And what I would do is I would dress in a certain way or have my hair in a certain way. And even if this is particularly to catch the attention of other people, it's what made me feel the most confident. And now that I'm thinking about it, it made me feel confident because I felt that this is what other people liked, and therefore I pursued it. Being desired is something that a lot of people chase, and I was one of those individuals. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but when it becomes overbearing to oneself and one's well-being, it does definitely become a problem. Usually in podcasts, I have an answer for what's worked for me in the past or what I'm currently doing, and this is something I'm actively working on and I'm actively practicing in order to fight back what I'm often feeling is pushed upon younger women. And I found that I put so much of my energy, especially last year. I'll start off with an example. Particularly last year, in social settings where men were present, I was typically much more quiet. I would not participate or voice my opinion as much as I would have if I was in a community of women or non-male individuals. I tended to dress in a way that was uncomfortable for me just to please others. I would always look, quote unquote, I have air quotes right now, but presentable. And this is often not a requirement or checklist that men consider. This is not often as a priority as it is for us women, as it is for men. Feeling the constant need to always be the best we can be and strive to be the best we can be and be one in a million is something that's often pushed onto women and young girls. And it is so incredible to be inspirational and break groundbreaking things and accomplish wonderful things. But it's almost as if to be recognized, women have to accomplish this huge milestone, groundbreaking discovery. And for men, if they do something that's much less than that, they're qualified. And at least for myself, I have felt that I have had to prove myself so much more. I have had to advocate for myself so much more just to be valued and seen the same as a man that has not done the same. And it's so frustrating to see because we are, one, pushed to constantly please men, and we're not rewarded or seen or appreciated for doing so. We're often the complete opposite. We're often neglected, and it's so frustrating to see, and it is so horrible to encounter. And what's even worse is when other women are giving into this. And this is why education is super important, so that more women and more minority groups are empowered to do what makes them feel empowered, rather than give in to what they think they should do in order to be worthy of praise and to appeal to their peers and to submit to what is seen as desirable in the society that they live in. It's so freeing to give up the want and the need and the craving of others' validation. It is so freeing to just use your voice and not give a damn about what anyone else has to say. As long as it's respectful of yourself, as long as it's not harmful to yourself and anyone else, why not say what you have to say? That is something that I have really taken the time to really understand, and I've recently put it into practice, and it has been the most freeing experience ever to say what you have to say and not care about how that's being perceived, because that's not in your control. And it's foolish to want to control other people's thoughts and opinions on your existence. That's something that is not your business. That's none of your business. How someone might perceive you for being you, for doing what makes you empowered, what makes you feel good about yourself, and you have feel no need to appeal to someone or make someone like you. You should never have to do that. Your existence itself is enough. And I'd like you to actually take that in. Your existence itself is enough, and you do not need to appeal to something you don't want to appeal to. And sometimes, I used to do this too. I still actually find myself doing it. You know, it's something that we become accustomed to as a habit, but almost convincing ourselves that that is what we want, and making up excuses for other people's behaviors in our own mind. Oh, they were just, having a bad day, and they talked to me in this manner. Or, oh, they were just stressed out, and they said this that I really didn't appreciate, and it really did not make me feel good about myself, but that was not on their part or anything. These excuses are not, in some cases they are valid, but they're often not. It doesn't take a lot to be kind to another individual. It does not take a lot. It's actually much easier to be kind than it is mean. It's easier to care and empathize with people rather than hate. It's so much easier to just be a good person. And if someone else isn't being that for you, and if someone else cannot treat you in a way that makes you feel good about yourself, makes you feel included and seen and supported, I really suggest that you look at the scenario that you're in and look at the people you're surrounding yourself with and really analyze if that's a situation that's actually pushing you towards your higher good, or is that keeping you back from really achieving what you really want, what it is that you want to achieve in your life. Another example I'll throw at you is another thing last year. Last year was a crazy thing. If you listen to my past podcasts, last year was a time for growth, but I was constantly surrounding myself with someone that had somewhat of a goal. But I personally am a very, very, very ambitious person. I'm very driven and passionate, and I am someone that's constantly trying to grow and learn and achieve new things. And this person was not that individual, but I was so caught around their finger. I felt the need for their approval, and I constantly chased their possible admiration of me. I was constantly running after a possibility that they might see my worth. And that is a place you don't want to be in. Number one, because you should not have to convince someone of your worth. You should never have to do that. You might in an interview, but relationships and friendships aren't supposed to be that way, right? A relationship isn't an interview. You shouldn't have to constantly be proving to someone that you are worth having around, that you are worth the time and energy. I promise you the right people will just see that. But secondly, I was chasing this individual who happened to be a man. I was chasing his approval, even if that didn't necessarily help me with my goals. That actually held back from my goals and what I wanted to achieve. I'm someone that is very, very active, and I care deeply about my health. But when I was with this individual, I realize now that I had been taking on more substance use. I was taking in things that were not good for my body that I otherwise would not have. So not only was this scenario stopping me from achieving my goals, it was actually detrimental to my health. And when we view it from that view and lens, it's like, what was I doing? And sometimes when you're in that scenario, it's really, really hard to see. And I hope I can speak to someone that is in a scenario like this. But your gut is usually right. And if you are not in a situation that is encouraging you and positively pushing you to be the best you can be, and constantly encouraging you to achieve your goals, you may not be in the right place. And this again goes back to liking your own presence. Maybe it is that you just come back to yourself at the end of the day. Maybe it is that you possibly say no to hanging out with people that aren't super good for you, and instead allocating that time to be with yourself and possibly do something that will actually help you achieve your goals. Let's just say you want to do super well in school and you're hanging around with people that don't make you feel seen or supported and are also not aligned with that goal of yours. Maybe if they were aiding your mental health or made you feel good about yourself, maybe that would be something to consider. If that's not the case, if they're not actively encouraging you to achieve your goals, that's not a situation that you should be in. And it's really hard sometimes to get out of it. I have seen and I have experienced that challenging aspect of how hard it can be to get out of a situation like that. And even if a opportunity is presented to you and decorated nicely with a nice pretty bow on top, sometimes you will still say no because we're so used to being in this situation where we're trying to appeal to everybody and make sure absolutely everyone's okay. And this is again, turning back to living for the male gaze. Men don't do that. Men do not do that. Women do that a lot. Non-male identities do that a lot. We tend to make sure absolutely everyone is accounted for and everyone is tended to and everyone is happy and joyful, but we tend to neglect ourselves. We tend to neglect our own well-being and how we're doing. That's something I don't want for you. I want everyone listening to this to do one thing for themselves today. Do one thing for yourself that is for your own good, and that is for who you want to be, that pushes you to achieve your own goals, because at the end of the day, you have you. And it's your responsibility to take care of your own health, your own mind, and your own body. So come back to yourself and really sit with that. Sit with that and really think about, am I currently on track to achieve what I want to? Am I really on track to take care of myself in the way I want to? Am I really on track to be who I want to be in the future? And sit with that. Today I was also thinking about the concept of the one, and when people ask themselves or other people, how do you know that that person was the one for you? How do you know that he was the one for you? And it got me thinking about how I would possibly answer that question. And what became very evident to me was, in our lives, another person may not be the one for you. Maybe the one in your life, even if you have a partner, is yourself. What if the one in life in general was yourself, and how your ambitions drive you and how the passions you have show up in every life, in how you look at strangers with kindness and how you treat people with kindness? What if that one was yourself, and how lovely of an individual you are? That's an aspect that I don't think is talked about at all, but I think it's so true. And this is a more newer concept, so I completely understand that this is something that you don't necessarily agree with right away or at all. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions, but the fact of women living in the male gaze because of the patriarchy, or not all women, but unfortunately most women, it's not just a theory or a concept. It's something that does show up in our day-to-day choices. For example, choosing outfits because they're flattering or make us look a certain way over, actually liking what we're wearing. Or if we actually like the clothes that we're buying or the things that we purchase on a day-to-day basis. Restricting ourselves from eating something that brings us pleasure, or dieting in order to maintain a certain body type that is deemed to be more attractive or desirable in society, and these people that are typically finding those body types attractive or pushing for this unhealthy way of consuming nutrients are often men. So to attend to the male gaze, again, rather than eating what makes you feel nourished and full and content and gives you the energy to carry out the things that you want to do and give you the courage and the energy to show up for yourself and conquer the day. Exercising, not for strength or in order to maintain our mental health, but rather to make our body look a certain way. And sometimes this can go as far as an unhealthy amount of exercising. I talked about this in a last episode, but having a more energy output, so exercising much more than we are giving back to our body and rejuvenating through sleep and through eating. And another common one is staying in situations, again, as I said, where we accept the poor treatment, often from men, because we've been conditioned that attention from men equals value. And the thing is, these habits aren't just random. They're survival strategies that we have often picked up, but at some point, these modes of survival that we're often in turn into self-sabotage. And these old habits aren't just comfort zones that our nervous system are used to. They're patterns that reinforce the external validation that we may possibly receive from the male counterparts that we share the earth with. And this becomes self-sabotage when we, in terms of health, having an over-exercising or under-eating because we think that possibly we are only valuable if we look a certain way. Or going back to people that have treated us badly because we think love is acceptance at any cost, regardless of how they treat us or regardless of how people make us feel, but just to have people around for some sort of status or how we may be perceived with this person alongside us, even though they aren't necessarily actually alongside us. Or avoiding being alone because it feels uncomfortable. Or swing to the complete opposite. And isolating completely. Self-sabotage often may disguise itself as comfort, but it's often just replaying old scripts that are written by someone else's expectations. And freedom, on the other hand, can look like the following. And I really encourage you all to listen intently to just 4 simple examples that I'm going to give, because these are things that seem really simple, but we often don't give in to these things that actually make our souls feel free. One of them is eating what nourishes you, and without guilt. This can be hard for some people. I think her name's Helen Bone Carter or something. I apologize if I'm saying the name wrong. But in an interview, she talks about how, at the end of the day, when you're 80 years old, you're not going to think about how you are so glad that you didn't have that last piece of cake. You're going to think about, wow, I really enjoyed that piece of cake. I really enjoyed eating my bread with butter in the evenings. I really enjoyed my ice cream and my walks in the summer. I really enjoyed having my bagels every morning with my favorite blueberry cream cheese. We're going to think about that. We're going to think about how it made us feel rather than how we looked, because that's not going to really matter. That's not going to matter when we're 80. We're going to rethink about how we felt rather than how we looked. That's going to be what's more important. Another thing is moving your body and being active in a way that feels good to you and is actually taking care of your body and strengthening yourself rather than caring about how much calories you're burning or looking a certain way. And this has some sort of a balance. It's okay to work towards maybe having a larger part of a certain muscle, but that has to come in a healthy way. And if it's not coming at a healthy way, that's when it becomes a problem. Saying no to people that don't treat you with respect, or saying no to situations or opportunities that don't serve you, because those aren't really opportunities. They're just situations that seem comfortable when they're really not and don't serve your highest good. Enjoying your own company without the feeling of missing out, or the fear that you are missing out, without FOMO. And this is so common in young people, but you are phenomenal, and I want you to really sit with that. You have lovely energy, and it's so important to come back to that at the end of the day. Freedom is like walking into a room and not immediately thinking, how do I look, or how did I appear to other people, but rather, how do I feel? How do I feel in this place? Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel respected? How do I feel? And coming back to yourself. And self-care is not selfish. Taking care of yourself is not selfish at all. That is something that might be pushed typically on mothers, typically on women, not so much men, but it can be placed on men too, other minority groups. But taking care of yourself is not selfish at all. If anything, it's selfless. Making sure that you're taking care of yourself so that you can show up for the people around you, how is that selfish? That's, if anything, a selfless act to make sure that you have the energy and that you are bringing the energy that may be required to make the world a better place, to spread kindness, to tell that stranger that you love their smile, or to be nice to the waitress, or extra nice to someone. Taking care of yourself so that you can show up for the people around you is not selfish at all. That's just a common misconception that is often ingrained into ourselves in a capitalist society. But taking care of yourselves, again, is not selfish. So here are some things that I'd like you to reflect on. So either just think about it or maybe journal. But where are you still performing for the male gaze, or if you don't necessarily align with the male gaze, maybe just for other people's approval? Where are you still performing for the approval of others? The second one I'd like you to think about is, what would you do differently if no one was watching? What would you do differently in the things you wore, in what you ate, in the way you show up for yourself, if you knew that no one was going to be watching you while you did those things? So here are some small experiments that you can choose to do. I really suggest that you at least do one if you're feeling courageous, maybe all three. But one, wear the outfit that you love. And maybe not the one that you think is most desirable to society, or what you think will make you look most flattering. But again, do what makes you feel confident and empowered, but that should be your focus. Try not to give in to the approval of others, but rather what makes you feel confident and what makes you feel empowered to show up for yourself every single day. Try a workout that's fun and not punishing, so that you look a certain way or feel accomplished. Do something for your body that makes you feel good while you're doing the thing, rather than it feeling like a punishment. And lastly, take yourself out to coffee, or if you don't drink coffee, maybe it's hot chocolate, or a solo date, to simply exist with yourself and not feel a need to carry out something for someone else. Try coming back to yourself. Try doing something for yourself just because. You don't need a reason. I promise you, you don't need a reason to do lovely things for yourself. You are already deserving of that. And you definitely don't need someone else's approval to do those lovely things for yourself. And I do want to reiterate, old habits may have been who you were in the past, but that doesn't necessarily have to be who you are now. They are who you learned to be, and the real freedom comes when you unlearn what doesn't serve you anymore. When you realize something that you were doing that definitely does not serve you, and that definitely does not serve your highest purpose and your highest good, and rather start living in alignment with what will bring you your highest good and what will help you achieve what you want to achieve. I want to thank again Brittany Broski's podcast. Check her podcast out. It is very lovely and really got me thinking and wanting to sit down for this podcast today. I also want to mention Tori Dunlap. Her financial feminist book is something I talked about in a recent episode. I've really been enjoying it. I am now halfway, and I am very excited to keep reading it. And I invite you, dear listener, to let me know. Either comment on this, if you're watching this on YouTube, in the YouTube comment section, or if you're on a podcast platform, either message me on at radiant.ca on Instagram. What's one habit that you're ready to stop falling back into, and one habit that you're putting away so that you can put yourself first? Let me know. And as always, you are loved, you are safe, and you are supported. You are valid in the way that you are. I love you all so much. Bye bye, lovers, and see you all next time.